Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a highly focused look at the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. This was an event completely defined by unprecedented extremes. On one hand, you have massive logistical challenges, total schedule disruptions, and some really intense off-pitch controversies. But on the exact same token, it delivered some of the most spectacular, historic, and literally record-breaking on-pitch glory we have ever seen in the sport. It really is a tale of two tournaments.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. 1. A groundbreaking host. 2. Logistical shifts and stadiums. 3. Human rights and workers. 4. Historic on-pitch performances. And finally, 5. The legacy of 2022.
Section 1. A groundbreaking, controversial host. Breaking new ground in the Middle East.
Let's rewind a bit to the year 2010. That's when Qatar was awarded the hosting rights, which was a massive geographic milestone, right? It was the very first World Cup to be held in the Middle East. But breaking that new ground, well, it meant a major shock to the football system. Think about traditional World Cups. They happen during the Northern Hemisphere's summer, May, June, July, and they're usually spread across vast geographic areas. But Qatar's intense summer heat made that completely impossible. So to avoid the extreme climate, the whole tournament was shifted to November and December. It was squeezed into a highly compact 29-day time frame, which basically forced all the major European domestic leagues to just completely pause their seasons right in the middle of their schedules. A huge logistical disruption.
Section 2. Logistical shifts and stadiums. Building a World Cup from scratch.
So shifting the calendar was really just the beginning. The next massive hurdle was the infrastructure. Think about trying to host 32 international football teams with all their staff and fans in a physically small nation. Well, the answer to that challenge resulted in this incredible number, 10 kilometers. Because of Qatar's physical size, 24 of the 32 competing teams were based within a mere 10-kilometer radius of each other, heavily concentrated in the Doha area. This made 2022 the most compact tournament since all the way back in 1930. It completely eliminated the need for players to hop on domestic flights for matches. They essentially just stayed at the exact same base camp for the entire duration.
And to accommodate those games, the amount of infrastructure developed was staggering. They utilized 8 stadiums spread across 5 cities. Now, 7 of these were brand new, custom-built venues from scratch, while the 8th, the Khalifa International Stadium, was heavily renovated. And to combat that desert climate we talked about, these stadiums were actually equipped with advanced cooling systems designed to drop the temperatures inside by up to 20 degrees Celsius. It was an absolute game changer. Plus, because a country of Qatar's size obviously doesn't need 8 massive 40,000-plus seat stadiums long-term, the original plan was to literally remove the upper tiers of several venues post-tournament, essentially reducing their capacities by half.
Now, what's really interesting here is the story of Stadium 974. During the build-up, it was heavily celebrated as the very first fully temporary World Cup stadium ever used. It was supposed to be completely dismantled after the tournament, acting as this great model of sustainability. However, as of November 2024, that just hasn't happened. It currently sits completely abandoned right in its original site, just sort of an unfulfilled piece of the tournament's post-game legacy.
Section 3. Human rights and workers. The off-pitch realities and global scrutiny.
Now, you absolutely cannot understand the 2022 World Cup without looking deeply at the severe off-pitch realities. The sheer scale of the infrastructure required drew totally unprecedented global scrutiny. Human rights organizations and media outlets levied some incredibly heavy criticism regarding the migrant workers brought in to build all these stadiums. Amnesty International reported poor working conditions and highlighted instances of forced labor, specifically noting that many workers actually had to pay large recruitment fees just to get a job in the first place. The Guardian went as far as estimating that up to 4,000 workers could die from lax safety leading up to the tournament, which obviously painted a really grim picture of indentured servitude.
So the crucial point to understand here is that this intense scrutiny did force a response. Between 2015 and 2021, the Qatari government adopted several new labor reforms. They introduced a minimum wage for all workers, and they formally removed the controversial kafala system, which was the system restricting labor mobility. Interestingly enough, in 2017, the International Labor Organization actually concluded that no rights were being violated, and they officially closed their complaint against Qatar. Furthermore, a Guardian survey of 1,000 workers actually found that 86% of them felt the labor changes had indeed improved their lives. So as you can see, it's a highly debated, highly complex narrative with very different perspectives. And that scrutiny also built into some much broader cultural friction during the event itself. Qatar's strict laws clashed directly with international fan norms. Homosexuality is illegal in Qatar, and there was massive controversy when FIFA threatened to issue automatic yellow cards to European team captains who were planning to wear rainbow armbands. On top of that, despite earlier promises, the sale of alcohol was suddenly banned at stadiums right before the tournament began. Even religious accommodations were affected. Qatar banned cooked kosher food for Jewish visitors shortly before kickoff, citing security concerns. It was a real clash of cultures.
Section 4, Historic On-Pitch Performances. Records broken and new benchmarks set. But despite all the intense off-pitch debates, the absolute second the referee blew the whistle, the tournament delivered some of the most unforgettable football in history. Just look at this number, 172. That is the total number of goals scored across the 64 matches. Averaging 2.69 goals per match, this officially became the highest-scoring World Cup in the entire history of the 32-team format. The attacking play was just relentless, to the point where every single participating team scored at least one goal.
We also saw some truly historic team performances, and really, none more inspiring than Morocco. They completely shattered ceilings by becoming the very first African nation and the first Arab nation to ever reach a World Cup semifinal. Their defensive masterclass and just incredibly passionate play saw them defeat heavyweights like Belgium, Spain, and Portugal. They ultimately finished in 4th place and set a massive new benchmark on the global stage.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer individual dominance we witnessed as well. France's Kylian Mbappé was just an absolute force of nature, scoring 8 goals to take home the Golden Boot, which, by the way, is the most goals by a single player since 2002. And right behind him was Argentina's Lionel Messi with 7 goals. Messi's brilliant overall play earned him the Golden Ball for the tournament's best player. You could literally feel that these two superstars are on a collision course.
Section 5, The Legacy of 2022. The greatest final ever played?
So all of these storylines, the logistics, the controversies, the incredible individual brilliance, it all culminated on December 18th. Let's just walk step by step through the breathtaking timeline of this final between Argentina and France. Argentina dominated early on. Messi scores a penalty in the 23rd minute, followed by this beautiful team goal finished by Di Maria in the 36th. Honestly, it looked totally over. But then, in the 80th minute, Mbappé scores a penalty, and literally less than 2 minutes later, he scores again, tying the game at 2-2 out of nowhere. We go into extra time. Messi scores again in the 108th minute, but Mbappé wasn't done, hitting a second penalty in the 118th minute to tie it 3-3. The swings in momentum were absolutely unimaginable.
And even though he ended up on the losing side, Kylian Mbappe's performance here permanently etched his name into history. He became the very first player to score a hat-trick in a World Cup final since England's Geoff Hurst did it all the way back in 1966. It was just a legendary display of sheer individual willpower on the biggest stage imaginable.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, the night belonged to Argentina. They triumphed 4-2 in the penalty shootout, claiming their 3rd World Cup title and their first since 1986. For Lionel Messi, winning that Golden Ball, it was an exceptionally poetic capstone to a legendary career, firmly cementing his status for so many as the greatest player of all time. And his teammate Emiliano Martinez also took home the Golden Glove for his absolutely crucial saves.
So as we look back at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, we really are left with a deep juxtaposition. Right, on one side, we witnessed true logistical marvels, staggering new infrastructure, and arguably the greatest football final ever played. But on the other, we observed intense cultural clashes, massive schedule disruptions, and severe human rights controversies. So how will history ultimately weigh these spectacular sporting achievements against the heavy human and logistical costs required to host them? It's a massive question, and it's one that will define the legacy of this tournament for decades to come. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.